Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kevin Quinn, and it's my pleasure today to introduce the moderator of today's panel, Vice Admiral William Hilardes, the Commander of Naval Sea Systems Command, or NAVSEA, as we say. After graduating from the Naval Academy in 1981, Admiral Hilardes went on to a distinguished career as a submarine officer, serving in both fast attack and ballistic missile submarines. The highlight of his operational career was command of USS Key West, SSN 722. Since becoming an acquisition professional in 2002, he has served as Director, Advanced Submarine Research and Development, Program Manager for the SSGN program, and Program Executive Officer for Submarines. He assumed command of NAVSEA on 7 June 2013 and now oversees a global workforce of 56,000 civilian and military personnel responsible for the development, delivery, and maintenance of Navy ships, submarines, and systems. As a former commander of the Naval Surface Force Atlantic, I can tell you that there is no command more important to surface force readiness than NAVSEA. And I couldn't be happier that NAVSEA is in the hands of such an inspiring leader and consummate professional. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Vice Admiral William Hilardes.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Thanks for that very kind introduction. I'd like to first acknowledge the Surface Navy Association. Kind of admired from afar over the last 31 years or so of my career. Now I feel like I'm home, and I very much appreciate everything the Surface Navy Association does for our Navy, particularly our Surface Navy. And I have to say the only thing missing from the agenda is a clam bake. So you have to go to Groton to figure out what that one meant. I'd also like to start by thanking many of you, both on the industry side and on the government side, for everything that was done over the last 3.5, now almost 4 months, since the terrible tragedy in the Navy Yard. We found ourselves homeless, almost 2,700 NAVSEA, predominantly civilians, but civilian and military folks, wandered around M Street, literally, looking for a place to work. What was brought home in the immediate aftermath was how much the Navy needs NAVSEA and how important our headquarters is to the execution of the daily business of the Navy. And to each of you who either hosted some part of our workforce, helped them out just in the matter of their daily business, I just want a sincere thank you from all of us. The workforce is almost to its new normal. We crossed over 2,000 folks moving into the temporary facility down at Buzzards Point. Thank you. I know there were some Coast Guard officers here. Thank them for vacating our building just in time for us. And I'll just highlight, normal to the average person who used to work in Building 197 is a desk, a phone, a computer that has a reasonable bandwidth to NMCI that you know you're going to show up at every day when you come to work. And we still have about 500 who haven't quite gotten a new normal. We're really close. And again, thank you for everything you've done. I also have to acknowledge I could not be more proud of those people, those great Americans, who gutted through some of the most difficult times that I can imagine. And 9/16 happens to fall about 2 weeks prior to the end of a fiscal year. The NAVSEA books almost $28 billion. Matters a lot to the Navy and the Department of Defense how NAVSEA finishes a fiscal year. And the contracting workforce, the budget financial workforce, the program management folks did an amazing amount. Used to have a tot-up of all the things we accomplished in that last 2 weeks, but it included delivery of a ship and almost $1.6 billion in contracts that were done from that virtual headquarters scattered all around M Street and the rest of Washington. And then I would be remiss if I didn't remind you all, we can never forget those 12 great Americans that were killed on 9/16. I visited with all almost all the families, I still have 2 left over the holidays. They're doing well, and they really appreciate the support that many of you put out to them. I will specifically acknowledge, I won't acknowledge the organizations that asked not to be acknowledged, but some of the organizations that gathered up resources and distributed to the families did a great job. The families are very appreciative of everything everyone did to help them, so thank you. The reason I start with that is in the middle of that, about a week and a half after 9/16, a box showed up into my temporary office. I was using MSC's conference room as my office. It's a beautiful big wood table with VTC, and it was my office, literally. And a box shows up, and Pat Dolan comes in and goes, "The strategic business plan is done." So the business plan, the colored glossy that many of you have seen, was finished printing. Now, we had decided what that business plan was going to be. The team had signed off on it well before the 9/16, but the printer delivered it shortly thereafter. So we got the leadership team together, and we did a quick review of the tenets of that strategic business plan and decided as a team that it still met the mark, that it was still where we wanted to take NAVC over these next few years, and that although we'd had a temporary diversion, that those business plan elements were the critical business plan, the critical things that we thought we needed to get done over the course of of my tenure at NAVC, and of course I hope it endures past that. The tenets of it, I think we have a chart, if I can get the next chart up, are fairly straightforward, and I think that for this conference, the first title, "It's All About the Ships," is really the essence of the strategic business plan. And what our panel today, we have Admiral Dave Gale is going to talk about our efforts to go really continue the progress made on improving surface ship maintenance and modernization. It really should have those words in there now that I look at it. The shipboard preventive maintenance was interesting. We did a reduction in administrative distractions drill, and PMS came up again, just like it does about every few years. And the sailor said, "Boy, PMS is hard and it's cumbersome and everything else." Mark Whitney's going to talk about our efforts to streamline the system, to make sure we have the right maintenance in the PMS system, and that we've made it as easy as possible for those sailors to do the maintenance that's required on their equipment at that level to make these ships last for the longest period. And then the third part about It's All About the Ships is warfighting system commonality. That has been the principal job of the Integrated Warfare System, PEO, since it was created, and Joe Horn will talk about our efforts in that area. The other 2 areas I'll just touch on briefly before I turn it over to the other panel members. Technical excellence and judiciousness, and what's highlighted in that title is the "and." It is very, very difficult to be technically excellent, but we have achieved that. Our technical folks at NAVC and in the supporting commands are the best at what they do in the world. To be technically excellent and judicious, that is to bring cost into the equation, to think about the places where the requirements we put on to be excellent are driving us out of business in many cases, and then figure out how to quantify the risk, present that risk to the warfighters and the fleet commanders and say, "Hey, are you willing to take on this risk? We're willing to recommend that you do. Here are the things we think you should do." That "and" is the essence of that topic, and it really comes down to, we wrote the curves when we talk about the knee in the curve. The requirements curves were made by the technical folks at NAVC with our industry partners. And so to ask the fleet where to set the requirement, we should be coming in and saying, no, if you reduce that requirement by this amount, that's where the knee in the curve is, where you can save a bunch of costs and get the 95% solution or the 80% solution if we decide that that's where it should be. The other part of that technical excellence is really about our workforce. As many of you know, we took about a 15-year hiring hiatus, and that demographic is still in our workforce. And so our most excellent folks, the people who are at the top of those pyramids, there's about a 15-year gap in experience between them and their replacement. I worry about that gap a lot as those senior civilians predominantly move to inevitable retirement. I'm told that we'll all get there eventually, that we lose that essence of what makes us technically excellent. And so we're investing and investigating ways to go both accelerate the knowledge transfer across that gap, and of course to use modern learning to go help with the experience part, which is very hard to build 15 years experience designing ships when you're not designing ships. And so that'll be a tremendous challenge to us as we move forward. The last one is sort of a no-brainer in the current fiscal environment. By every measure, the next 3 to 5 years are going to be in flat to declining budgets. And so our ability to go control the costs of everything we buy and control the cost of everything we modernize will be critical. I think that there's, in the challenging the requirements, and again, that's partly in the mirror. Pentagon owns the requirements, but we do all the work below them. That's work for us to tee up for the Pentagon. I think there's an organizational piece. Admiral Roden and I have been working on this. How do we go bring the right level of decision makers together, present those opportunities, and then decide them? And really, I'll say internal to the surface Navy, because predominantly the things that will come up are surface related. And the SCIB was how we used to do that. We used to have a good conversation about requirements and cost in the SCIB. It probably won't be called the SCIB, but the SCIB idea is what that was after. And then in the maximizing across platforms, we talk about it a lot, and predominantly across platforms results in either the way you build the ship or the way you modernize it, making it common between ship classes. We stood up a new code at NAVC 06. We kind of recycled a number, but the new, and it is its predominant job, NAVC 06, led by my Vice Commander, Admiral Tom Kearney, will be about that cross-platform commonality. It will require teamwork between my 4 shipbuilding PEOs and the main body of NAVC. And again, that's a team. It's a shared responsibility. But my PEOs are committed to going and bringing that into the new construction side, and then in the modernization, we'll work those commonality initiatives as well. So that's the essence of our strategic business plan, and now we'll move to the panel discussion. I think that this panel, and predominantly, I think Admiral Gortney set it off last night. We are going to take back control of the ship's schedules. For Admiral Gortney and the fleet commanders to have control of the ship's schedules means we have to get our maintenance and modernization done as predicted. That is, start on time, finish on time, and do it in a cost-effective way. And so I think it's very, very appropriate as we really stand up our ability at NAVC to coordinate both maintenance and modernization, bring those two things to the table and to the fleet commander, and then execute that maintenance and modernization in a coherent way. That I think the panel is well prepared to discuss that. And so I think first we'll let Admiral Dave Gale talk about improving surface ship maintenance. Dave?
Sure. Good morning, folks. It's a great pleasure to be here with you again. And as I prepared for this event, I reflected on the 4+ years that I've been grinding away at this business and making incremental progress. That it's probably the 4th SNA event. It is some form or another I've been able to speak to you about the business we're in and some of the challenges we face. The first slide that's up here right now should not be new to anybody who's been at any of the previous engagements with me on this business. If I could reflect for a moment, when Admiral Harvey commissioned what was referred to as the Bilal Report, and there was some deep and thorough look at the business of ship readiness and how surface maintenance and modernization played in some of that. I was tasked by then Vice Admiral McCoy to go understand and start codifying and displaying the gaps and start working on those issues. And I'm happy to say that 4 years later, the story remains unchanged, that we understand what challenges the business from end to end. The one modification in this slide that I will confess is that we started out with 5 big rocks. But as I started to apply whatever heat and light I could apply to an organization that involved over probably close to 6,000 civilians and sailors and that many more private sector wrench turners, that there was a missing piece that we needed to get at, and it's the sixth rock on the right called alignment and oversight. And today, I would tell you that alignment and oversight is probably the single biggest challenge before us as we consider how many different organizations there are in this business that have some effect on whether or not we plan it right and execute it right in the form of stabilizing a requirement, flowing money into the process at the right time to do proper planning, and to be able to execute to a schedule that we all agreed to at the beginning. We are challenged in that area, and Vice Admiral Allard has mentioned that there's an awful lot of interest, and certainly NAVSEA is going to be helping lead the way in what it's going to take to get that right. I'm going to quickly update you on the 6 rocks. Assessment plan and policy, a program known as Total Ship Readiness Assessment, a term pulled right out of the submarine playbook, fully resourced. Let me say that again, fully resourced to the man day to execute assessments on every ship that's in the program for assessments. It is not under-resourced by 1 minute or 1 dime for full execution. The challenge in it is, and we're working with the type commanders on this, and Admiral Bill Galinas on the RMC side, to make sure that it is aligned with the ship schedules in the SFRM, Ship's Readiness Manual. That is, I'll say, some early learning ground for us. The program was challenged a little bit in FY13 when we slowed down spending on the Oman side. It did put some perturbations into the full implementation of TSRA. But again, it's a fully resourced program in 14 and out. So we do not lack for resourcing or process to go do assessments. And as we know, assessments done right and done at the right time better inform a work package. Very important. Sustainment program. Not as much progress on this one as I would like, but it maybe just took as long as it would take for me to eventually maybe become C21 to move this one a little further down the road. This one's about a grouping or aligning all of the resources for life cycle management of systems and equipments and how they perform in platforms into a common program that looks across all surface ships, all systems, and that we're doing the right life cycle activities to fight our way through obsolescence or maybe readiness challenges in the way systems are designed and performed so we can go and improve that. So I've told Admiral Roden that my intentions are to single it all up, and so that when we talk diesels, for instance, that it's not just amphib diesels, that it's diesels across all surface ships, for instance. So that's sustainment program. SurfMet. I cannot say enough about what we've done in this investment in SurfMet. This is bedrock. This is engineered requirements to do the right maintenance, the right deep maintenance at the right time to be able to deliver on an expected service life of a platform that we envisioned when we engineered it at the beginning. It gets 35, 40, 45. Even if we changed our plan and said we needed to take a platform out 5 more years, we now have the capability to go look hard with right engineering rigor on exactly what it's going to take to get 5 more years out of a ship. These are bedrock requirements. Nearly every ship in the Surface Navy is in the program. There are some exceptions. We're not making investment in FFGs, and LCS DG 1000 are coming in on the left-hand side. But I think I'd be able to say that by mid-year 14, we're on a glide path that we have every ship that can be in the program, and that about a third of those ships have either completed their first engineered maintenance availability or are in the process of planning for the execution of that availability. And this is one where we just need to stay the course. The leadership at SurfMep is solid. The processes are solid. Much of it, if not, well, there are some exceptions, I would say, much of the process is lifted right out of the submarine playbook at SubMep. These requirements are flowing into the budget process. Every ship's requirement is treated equally and the same in that process. Every man day of required engineered maintenance that we have asked for in that process, we have gotten a budget to go execute that. Now, in the year of execution, what does that really look like in the flow down? That's another debate, but we are succeeding in this area. We are growing the requirement, and the budgets are growing right along with it to go execute it. The challenge for us, and the thing that I'm working on very aggressively, is taking advantage of what we know in that requirement, marry it up with the program modernization requirement that's coming together for the same availability, and telling the fleet early exactly how many days and weeks that's going to take to accomplish all that work. Right now, today, we perform twice as much maintenance in dollar terms from 10 years ago in a notional schedule that's not engineered. We have the know-how today to go engineer the schedule too, and we're going to do that. RMC capability capacity. Bill Galinas relieved me, still very much climbing up the curve on restoring the manning in the RMCs to be able to oversee an increasing volume of work with increasing pressure for quality and schedule. We need to continue to climb that curve. I would tell you that the initial buy 3 years ago, I think, was 635 additional civilians, and we wanted to regrow the eye-level capabilities in the RMCs by as many as 1,800 sailors. We're continuing to climb that curve. We may not have that number right on the Civ Per side especially, and on the sailor side, I would just tell Admiral Roden, as many sailors as we can find a way to get into our IMAs, the more progress we can make in rebuilding our sailors' capability to maintain ships at sea. So that the RMC capability capacity thing is very, very real. It's an issue. It needs to grow. The budgets are there to support some growth. We may not have that number right. We need to continue to grind on that. Availability, execution, work certification. This is kind of the feedback piece. At the end of the avail, did we certify the work that we did to get the quality that we needed? And did we complete all the work that we said we were going to do at the beginning? Did something happen in process that took work out for one reason or another that we need to catalog and track? This is bedrock, again, activity for SurfMap to keep track of all maintenance that was scheduled, all maintenance that was performed, and to keep track of whatever backlog we might be building so that that too can build the budget for the next availability. And then last, like I said, the alignment and oversight piece is I think, the thing that looms most heavily right now on our business and be able to perform it better. We have too many people, individuals, all well-meaning, who have the ability to go and make a decision or pull a lever or to destabilize a solid funded requirement, budgeted requirement, in the planning process or in execution that can put any availability over a cliff, and in some cases before you ever started. And this is the piece that Admiral Hillardis and myself and many others, Admiral Roden's in the team, Admiral Copeman, Admiral Gumatau, there is a lot of, I'll say, heat and light again on the subject of who is going to be in control and accountable for this process from end to end when it comes to doing it right, tracking it from left to right, and being able to take the face shot in the end if we failed. And I'm peppered with face shots, so it's a sport. It's a fun sport. But again, really, I think for me the visual is, when you succeed, how many people are going to be on the stage with you to get the award? And when you fail, how many people will be on the stage for you when you get shot? And there's always a difference. There's a delta in that game. But I would certainly be privileged to be the guy who was accountable with all the organizations behind me to go get this done right. But we've got to get that aligned right, or I can't win. If we can go to the next slide very quickly. So the alignment piece. Today we have two different policies, one maintenance and one modernization, in this end-to-end process involving 2 years worth of left side planning before you ever get to day one of execution that is not run very well. The policies are not integrated. The IT applications that we use to, I'll say, screen, build work packages, plan work packages, integrate work packages between maintenance and modernization are not synchronized today. I will say culturally, we tend to have a divide amongst our leadership and our workforce on whether they're in the maintenance game or the modernization game. Well, what if we were both in the maintenance and modernization game and we started thinking about it that way from the top down? That is critical thinking that has to play out. What this chart depicts, and I'm not sure if it jumps out at you, but we have policy today on how we're supposed to be planning. We don't follow it. What you see on the chart on the right-hand side in the red area is that most of it comes together either in a, I'll say, stabilizing work package, getting it contracted for, and even getting it into, I'll say, on contract and putting it into execution is happening sometime in around about 3 months before you start the availability. A lot of people are showing up, well, where'd you come from? Oh, I'm going to put this new thing on the ship. No, you're not. Well, today we just we go for the waiver, we put it into the package, and the RMC is left to fix it on the downswing. Very challenging. As I proposed to Admiral Roden and Vice Admiral Hillardis and Admiral Copeman, we need to pull this thing to the left. We know at 720 the programmed requirement for maintenance and modernization across many programs. We know what we're going to do on an availability. We can understand and take advantage of the fact that every program's got a fielding profile, and that the great work of SurfMap and OpNav to get a budgeted engineered requirement into a work package on availability, we can lock that down and we can plan it and not change it. We can perform in this business. We've just got to decide that we can do that and give the right people the right authority to go manage that requirement through this process with a great deal of stability. That's the game for the future. And I will say one more thing as I close. SPIM authorities, Ship Platform Manager authorities. We gave it up on our side of the business. Going back to, I'll say, the carrier and submarine examples, they know how to do it. They know how to say no. They know when to say no. They know how to get to yes if you're doing it right. And we need to reestablish SMIM authorities within NAVC, C-21, on behalf of the fleet and the type commander and every Pathfinder program out there that both Mr. Stackley and Admiral Roden are sponsoring to get this planned better. We know what we're going to do. We've just got to have the right people overseeing modernization, the disciplines to the modernization planning process, such that we can win this game. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'll just I simplify this down to putting the weight of NAVC behind the cop and the cop. So the cop, the policeman, the sheriff that's going to oversee this and make sure that people follow the rules, or if they don't follow the rules, it's done in public as opposed to in the middle of the night. And then a common operational picture on what's in and what's out, what we're going to get done, how long it's going to take. And I think if we can pull off those two things, we'll have gone a great measure to supporting the OFRP that Admiral Gortney laid out. The other half of this, of course, is the modernization side. Principal modernization provider at NAVC is PEO IWS, and Joe's going to talk a little bit about how we go bring the modernization piece into this topic.
Thanks, Admiral. Appreciate it. Before I start, I did want to introduce you all a little bit to PEO IWS. It's a PEO that contains about 155 programs, and we work with probably some of the most professional industry partners in the world. We've got 13 of the finest program managers and 17 of the best captains any flag officer could ask for. Without them, none of this commonality would be possible. Indeed, none of the fine development that goes on in IWS would be possible. Our imperative here is very simply one. Thank you. Dealing with cost and inefficiency, as well as the efforts that we've been hearing over the last couple of days. In terms of cost, by installing multiple different systems designed to do, in essence, common functions across different ship types or different classes of ships, is leading us to cost in many arenas. It's leading us to cost in training. It's leading us to cost in buying different parts. It's leading us to cost in the infrastructure it takes to keep those systems up and sustained. And it's a cost we can no longer afford. It's also leading to mass inefficiencies. I think Vice Admiral Copeman talked about it a number of times in his presentation about sailors, about having to maintain several different schoolhouses for ostensibly the same equipment that functions or achieves the same function, just with different piece parts of equipment. And then lastly, the mandate that has been voiced very eloquently here by Admiral Gale and Admiral Hillardis, but sort of hammered home through the presentations by the Director of Surface Warfare the Commander of Naval Service Forces, and then yesterday by USFF, that we have a dedicated period of time that we've got to be in our maintenance, or whether it's maintenance, whether it's modernization, we've got to be in, and we've got to meet those timelines. Certainly, a common approach with common measures and common equipment sort of increases that predictability and gives us the confidence we need to be able to meet that mandate. The situation that we have is we didn't get here in the last 11 months, and it's going to take us a fair bit of time to do this in a judicious manner. But let me give you one example. C-21 was chartered by Vice Admiral Copeman some time ago to do a navigation study and look at where we were in individual pieces of the navigation suite across multiple classes of ships, and then to focus that examination by strike group. And what we found was daunting. You take any typical strike group that's preparing to deploy and look at the pieces of equipment that do common functions. Inertial navigation. Among those 11 ships, we may have 4 different kinds of INS, 3 different kinds of speed logs, all of them obsolete, nothing on the drawing board to replace them. When I say all of them obsolete, the parts that in those have significant obsolescence issues. 6 different kinds of computer programs driving the ECDIS solution, the presentation to the ship's team on how they're going to navigate the ship. So we are far from common across those arenas, and one we have to strive for. The opportunities this gives us are many. First, in terms of development, reduce cost. It is common processes lead to less overhead among our industry partners. So therefore, we can do things across multiple ship types, across multiple baselines in a fashion that is the same, and get rid of that overhead. One-time pass-through the certification and safety frameworks. And I don't mean that variations in computer program only have to go through one time, but we can, if we have common baselines, we can then proceed through that framework and only focus on the differences. Right now, to get an update to a baseline 5 Aegis program versus a baseline 7 program requires a complete end-to-end examination through that framework, and something that we've got to indeed reduce. We can leverage this substantial quality of evidence that we've got to gather in order to proceed through those certification processes, and not have to pay for a gathering of evidence several times in order to carry several different weapon systems through. Training. We could focus our packages again on those differences instead of having to create out of whole cloth a training package and train the sailors as they proceed to their career in Aegis alone. As they go from baseline to baseline, we owe it to them not to have to do the same function in different manners, requiring a different 6-week training period. We need to get them through and then focus on those differences, and we ought to look to reduce those differences. That comes through variance reduction or through commonality. And lastly, testing. Our testing periods are what they are because we have to guarantee our sailors tend to sleep with their ordnance, and we need to make sure that those warfare systems are safe to operate. So we go through an extensive testing regimen, again, as we proceed from baseline to baseline, or from ship type to ship type, or even among classes of ships. Being able to leverage that OQE is something that provides us a tremendous opportunity in terms of commonality. And lastly, we can look to reduce. We can look to focus those reduced dollars that we have to spend to fix the problems that we see in development, and fix them once, and not have to fix them and discover them across multiple different weapon systems and multiple different classes of ships. The next opportunity is in sustainment. You've heard, again, multiple senior surface warfare leaders here, and both Admiral Gale and Admiral Hillardis mentioned this morning, in terms of training, parts, and corrective maintenance. Variance reduction offers us a tremendous opportunity, again, to be able to reduce costs and to stop focusing that increased variance on the backs of our sailors. As a sailor goes through that pipeline again, we can focus on difference and not recreate the training package for him each and every time he goes through. The upgrades can support those objectives established by Admiral Gortney in the OFRP and spoken to very eloquently by Admiral Gale here this morning, and that is we have a very focused time period. We need to get in. We need to operate according to that structure. We need to be very transparent. We need to get in and then operate in that, to install or modernize in the period of time that we are provided and not be the cause of any delay. Again, commonality or variance reduction provides us that opportunity. There are some potential issues, however, that I don't want to paint a picture that we are proceeding with all haste. We certainly are working towards this effort, but there are some barriers that stand in our way and some efforts that we've got to overcome. First is the implementation. When I first started looking at this, and those PEOs before me, we have tried various models. We've tried a model where we have demanded a certain piece of equipment and offered that equipment to our industry partners as CFE. So they would, the shipbuilders would then mandate that in a contract to their shipbuilder. They would procure that piece of equipment and install it in the ship. We've looked at a model where GFE is the way to do, where my program managers would procure that equipment and then meet the in-yard need date imperatives established by the shipbuilder. Which model is the best? I can't sit here today and tell you with a fact the way we should proceed. But one thing is for sure, we've got to get to this virtual shelf of commonality where a shipbuilder or the folks that are modernizing can know that they can reach to a piece of equipment, a common piece of equipment, and whether that equipment is the same, an SPS 73, Victor 16, it's Victor 13, I'm sorry, exactly the same between an LPD 17 install and an Aegis install, or whether the modules inside that surface search radar are exactly the same. We've got to get our arms around that. We want, again, what the imperative is to reduce cost, to remove that burden from the backs of our sailors, and to make sure that we're in and we're out when we need to be in terms of modernization. So we've got to come through that and examine some of that. One thing we cannot do, we can't perturbate those schedules that have been addressed in multiple forums here throughout. We cannot reduce performance, and I'll talk to that a little bit. But what I do worry about in those alternatives that we've looked at and we've tried is we cannot increase cost. And I've got to, in a GFE environment where we are procuring those and providing them to our counterpart PEOs, I've got to have competitive pressure to ensure that my costs are what they are, and we're not just a monopoly in providing Admiral Lewis or Admiral Moore or Admiral Antonio. This is what it costs because this is what it costs. We've got to do everything we can to keep those costs to a minimum. But as Admiral Hillardis mentioned, that knee in the curve, I think we've done an awful lot to examine cost versus requirements and what is good enough. But we've got to do everything we can to continue to keep pressure and reduce that cost. In performance, we've got to create a mentality where we don't get so locked in to this to commonality that when capability arrives in the ship, it's not pacing the threat. It's common, but we're not pacing the threat across a broad class of ships or a broad swath of U.S. Navy capability. Some of the examples that where we have achieved success that I'd like to bring to your attention. First, the efforts that Joe Reason is doing in navigation are bringing us dividends today, both in our focus on ensuring that we have a common computer program across multiple platforms, positioning our hardware to accept that common computing program, and getting to a long-term arrangement where we look to a navigation suite of equipment that we might be able to compete across multiple industry partners. In Aegis, we have achieved massive amounts of success with the Common Source Library, where the same baseline that we're using to modernize our ships today, baseline 9, is the same baseline that we will put in new construction when we begin with those ships. It is a remarkable achievement. We've never before been able to focus that. And you look across what we're doing with baseline 9, whether it's cruisers, destroyers, new construction, or in fact Aegis Ashore, the reuse of that code is well above 95% across multiple applications and achieving massive success. SSDS, the same. Their single source library has ensured that the code reuse between multiple classes of ship is, again, above 90% and getting better. We are seeing in applications and how we shoot ESSM, how we shoot RAM, it's the same, regardless of whether we're going to shoot it from a large deck amphib or whether it's an aircraft carrier. And the computing program, the reuse of that code is exactly the same. Admiral Copeman, in his presentation the other day, brought up the presentation to the sailor with common functions ought to be the same. I am proud to report we are embarked upon an effort for ASW air controllers, where how an anti-submarine helicopter or a helicopter in an anti-submarine mission is being controlled is the same whether that air controller is on an aircraft carrier or whether he's on an Aegis ship. That ASTAC module resident in a baseline, in an ACB-16 or in ACB-16 of SSDS will be the same. So the presentation to the sailor at the glass, the buttons he pushes, will be the same in that tactical application of that capability. More importantly, how we raise anti-submarine tactical air controllers through that training, through that schoolhouse, how we train them in the ship will be the same, regardless of the baseline or of the computer program that he's operating from. In Aegis and SSDS, there are other successes that I'd like to highlight. The Joint Track Manager, which is how we take in vehicular tracks from our various sensors. That Track Manager module inside those computing plants are the same. That module is the basis for how we handle tracks and gives us the opportunity to create other examples of commonality as we go forward. And it is a tremendous force multiplier. We are we are actually delivering common displays and common processing to sailors across the multiple instantiations of ships, again, amphibs, cruisers, and destroyers. ESSM that Jack Knoll is working very hard on, the new Block 2 missile that we're just embarked on creating. That missile will have the rocket motor is absolutely the same as what we'll see in, or the propulsion system, actually the same as what we'll see in multiple other missiles, but the cards, the electronics, and the navigation system inside the missile, same as it is in standard missile. So again, how we, at the depot level, how we open those missiles up, how we care for those missiles, how those missiles speak to the ship is the same. That gives us further opportunities for commonality as we proceed to employ those capabilities. I talked to you about the Joint Track Manager Common Displays. That's a work of some very fine captains and civilians in Tom Drugan, John Hill, and Bob Shavak. What they are doing there is not ascending to any mandate. They're just doing common sense engineering, what IWS was created to do. Future candidates, I think there is much more room to do in navigation, and we are focused there. So we get to that navigation suite. We are far from ready to do that. We are having inquiries with industry, but I can tell you that we very much want to get to a part where we can compete a suite of equipment and look more broadly instead of trying to address a speed log issue, address an anemometer, address a DRT. We're looking at broader swaths equipment that we can, bundle's a bad word, but that we can collect together and then compete. Surface search radars, we have multiple different instantiations of that radar, and we are moving out with the SPS 73 to get that common and ensure performance is in accordance with the dictate required by the resource sponsors. And then lastly, in Standard Missile. A Standard Missile offers us multiple opportunities, not just with weapons inside Navy, but also with AMRAAM and opportunities for commonality among services. And that's where we're going. And we have our obsolescence program, a program which looks at the life cycle of that missile and how we would manage obsolete parts. Right now, we are largely taking the cue from the program manager of the Air Force, who has a very robust obsolescence management program with our industry partner, and one we are looking to manage together. So the future is bright. We didn't get here overnight. We won't have this fixed by Friday, but I can tell you that there is tremendous effort, not just in IWS, but throughout with our partners in the various PEOs and resource sponsors and fleet staffs to ensure that we've gotten the message, and we're working very hard to achieve that variance reduction. Thank you.
Great, Joe. And I think you're bringing to life what integrated warfare systems was intended to do as it was created. Last topic is about the basic sailor maintenance plan, maintenance system. The baseline that Dave Gale's operating on when he takes a ship into the Avail is that the PMS is done. The training and readiness of those radar systems is essential in the PMS, and yet the sailors don't like it and the leaders don't like it. So what Mark's going to talk about is the significant effort that we've undertaken and more to do on making PMS better. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you, Admiral. So I'm going to keep this short and simple, which is the way PMS should be. So I'm going to be consistent in that regard. So it's my intention to talk to you about the issues that we're hearing, what we're getting as feedback. I'm going to talk to you about what we're doing about it right now and in the foreseeable future, and then give you a sense of what that future vision looks like. So as the Admiral mentioned, it's clear, and a source of the information was from the Reducing Administrative Distractions initiative, that the sailors are definitely giving us the feedback that PMS is overly burdensome and it's complicated, and it should not be. And that's a couple of different perspectives. So from the force revisions, it takes a lot of hours at the work center supervisor to get the force revision implemented, go through all the changes, understand everything that's there. From the actual MRCs, the actual cards that are going down there, there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of notes, a lot of cautions. It is just a lot of extra work for them to get the work done. And also one of the feedbacks was, and being the father of twin teenage sons that are very visual and tactile, I'd like to see a handheld. Why can't I have a handheld? Why can't I take something down there and use that to do my PMS? And so we're listening to that as well. From the TICOM's perspective, we've gone to the very generalized PMS because it's easier that way. So what we've lost is we've lost the configuration-based PMS and that multi-configuration documents. It just makes it hard from a policy perspective. From the fleet, that broad kind of shift in the mentality such that across TICOMs it's a little bit difficult to handle from a policy perspective. The documentation, again, is complicated. It doesn't work well in largely distributed command structures, LCS-RON, where the ships are going to be. It just makes it a challenge for them to handle it. The inconsistencies in the schedules is a challenge, and the PMS feedback screening, the way that we get it back in headquarters, there's work that we can do that makes it easier such that the answers are not as costly nor time-consuming. And that, again, from the fleet perspective, some of the ambiguity and the expense that it incurs on getting maintenance done. So what are we working on? So right now what we're working on is policy, we're working on process, and we're working on tools all at the same time. So in process right now, from a policy perspective, is standing up a fleet requirements management board All the stakeholders are involved. The intention there is to make sure that what we're working on is prioritized and the right things that matter most. The configuration board at NAVC is going to be kind of the oversight piece of that and make sure that we're driving the change in an expeditious manner. One of the first things to do is to work on that distributed policy and institutionalize it within the Joint Fleet Maintenance Manual. Within the process, tackling the MRC cards, taking those cautions, taking the overly prescriptive PPE, hazmat, and making them such that they're simple, the step-by-step, and maybe some pictures in it, something that the sailors can take and actually go execute so that we're executing the maintenance at the right place, at the right time, at the right level. This is also where we start moving towards that configuration-based PMS. This is where we will start moving down the decentralized or the generalized PMS and start getting it to where it's hull specific, something tied to the configuration records of that ship, and I'll touch on that here in just a second. For the tools, SCED 3.2, moving in the right direction from where we are right now. The plan right now is to have SCED 3.2 in all of the ships that it's planned to be on by the end of this year. Fiscal year, just so we're clear. Fiscal year. And that's either live and or in training mode. And so that's a big leap forward. That is also going to be able to give the leadership on board a different dashboard so that they have some metrics to see how the maintenance is being done. Another aspect of that is tailored force revisions. This is where we are starting to do more of the work shoreside before it gets out to the ship, so it reduces the burden, the administrative burden, to implement those things that are changing. And it's giving, like I said, it's giving us some opportunity to get some different looks at different metrics, both on board the ship and how the quality of the PMS is working out. So what's the future look like? It is configuration-based PMS. It is tied to the ship. Can you picture a day where there are no more lineouts? There's no force revisions. It's simple. It's done shoreside. It's continuous revisions, so it's not tied to specific time frames. And it gives us a good, complete history of the maintenance that's being done on that ship. Web-based, integrated, metrics, things that will help both ship and shoreside make sure that the maintenance is being done right at the right time. And it also allows us to go down that road a little bit further with the handheld device, which we will pilot as part of the RAD program. But this is an opportunity here when we get the IT piece of it moving in the right direction. So that's 3M in a snapshot. We've heard it, we're working on it, and we're going to make it better. Short, sweet, and to the point. That's it, sir.
Great. Thanks, Mark. So what you heard here is not anything really wildly new. What we're mostly going to do, this is about discipline and execution. Almost all the policies are already in place. All of the boards and meetings are already there. We need execution, a cop and a cop. And so with that, let me just stop. We presented a lot of data across a broad spectrum, but ultimately the success of the OFRP will be on whether we can get our ships modernized and maintained in a timely manner, and whether the sailors can keep them up in between those maintenance periods. And so we're standing by to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Well, first off, thank you, gentlemen. It's an excellent presentation. Kurt Warden from Nova Power Solutions. We're a subcomponent supplier across multiple syscoms. And I'm going to address PMS first because it was the last subject. So one of the things I've noticed is that on our component, the maintenance requirement, even the periodicities on those requirements, are different between systems. And can you talk to us about what efforts are being made to make common components have common maintenance requirements?
So that will be within the purview of what we're going to be looking at once we move forward with the configuration-based PMS, is looking for consistent PMS on consistent components consistently. That's about
Sounds
right.
about right, yeah.
So that is recognized as an area that needs work, because even differences between ships, we have found that we've got differences there, and so we will tackle that, your specific concern, as we move forward, for sure.
There is one point on that, would be is the main component that it's attached to may actually be the driver, so that could be the difference, but it should be as consistent as it can be.
Right. Actually, you could probably save quite a bit of money if you use the same maintenance procedure from piece to piece, and rather than rewriting it, just
Right.
lift it from one and move it into the other.
No, absolutely agree with that.
So,
Gentlemen, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Seifert. Admiral Copeman, in his brief, mentioned condition-based maintenance a couple of times and talked about the need to implement not just on new construction ships, but to put it back on legacy vessels as well. When it came to the PMS side, I didn't see CBM mentioned, so how does that fit into your planning to be able to streamline PMS and make it easier for sailors to maintain their ships?
So CBM Plus is absolutely part of it. It's connected. I'd say it'll run in the background, but that's something that's also under my purview is NAVSEAL 4, and we've got a separate initiative going forward to backfit the ability to get that data off the ships. So we are working on that specifically.
But the condition-based maintenance requires data.
Right.
And what we lack at this moment is the data actually to go fully implement it. So it's collecting that data is be an important part of all that. So yeah, great question. Thank you. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time this morning. Max Cooper, PMS 339 Surface Training Systems. As we start talking about future surface combatants and starting to truly develop a ship that is a product of modern server technology and software capabilities, how do you see the modernization process changing in terms of having to simply update the computer program versus having to actually swap out the hardware in order to get the increased capability that we're going to need as these ships go through their life cycle?
So yeah, let me take a first stab, and then I'll let both these guys. From my point of view, there's an asynchronous. You got an asynchronous problem. The ship and the physical infrastructure of the ship is on a 35 year cycle, and every time you pull out the welding torches, you're talking big money. The hardware's on a 4 to 6 year cycle, depending on which server farm you buy, which part of the system you buy from, about 4 to 6 years. And then your software might be on the 6-month cycle in response to an urgent fleet need to change the electronic warfare posture of the ship. I think you got to take into account that asynchronous nature of those three things and separate them. Get the physical infrastructure right to host common hardware. Get the software right so that it can be hosted on that common hardware, and you'll have achieved the kind of alignment of those things that is possible. It is possible to do it. It's really hard, but I think both Admiral Horn and Admiral Gale are working towards that broad thought.
And I'll, from a policy perspective, I'll tell you that Mark Whitney and I have had conversations already about the need to evolve Navy modernization policy such that we're not treating software changes that are non-ship impacting, especially where availability is a concern, and field that stuff in different ways at different times than we feel the ship impacting alterations, which are heavy moving parts, cutting, welding, wrench turning kind of work. Today they're treated the same. They needed to be treated differently so that we can field them more effectively on the software side.
From the software perspective, I think key to what you're speaking of is the ability that some of the attributes that we see in the common source library and the single source library, where we are almost in a continuous stage of development, checking capability out of the library, working it, developing it, testing it, checking it back into the library, and then when that opportunity opens up, we're able to pull from that common source library and get it in the ship in a lot smoother fashion than heretofore.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay.
So in the near future, we expect the administration to release a new national security strategy. We also expect the results of the QDR to come out. And Congress has offered some relief to sequestration, but certainly not as much as we had hoped. So I'm wondering how, from a policy perspective, how your plans, how you think these external factors are going to impact you this year in terms of readiness and in years ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and predicting the future has the typical pitfalls I'll attempt to avoid. I would say regardless of the financial outlook, there is, I think, adequate resources in the readiness accounts if they're applied properly. That is, the discipline we're talking about, applied well, executed as predicted, will result in there being adequate resources for readiness. If we don't get this done, we'll continue to under-resource readiness. And so I believe that the answer is there's enough there, we got to go execute. And if we execute, we'll actually save money and be able to fit within those declining budgets. But yeah, go ahead.
I would, to echo the Admiral's words, absolutely right. Regardless of where we are with financial uncertainty, I think this is an imperative because we, as I said before, all this in terms of weapon system commonality, that variance is balanced on the backs of our sailors. We can't do that any longer, regardless of how much money we have.
Did I answer your question, or do you want another bite at that apple?
I think so. Certainly, these factors, particularly sequestration, I think will limit significantly what you all are able to do. It'll certainly impact the plans and execution. But
I think you make the point is our Navy has never been more in demand, and whether it be things going on in the Mediterranean or in the Persian Gulf or out in the Western Pacific. Those 284, 85 ships we have today have to be made to last to their service life or beyond, as Admiral Gale indicated. That is the least cost solution to the largest possible Navy. So that path goes straight through the middle of what we were talking about. So thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Admirals. Chris Barrett with Delta Resources. First off, thanks for your service and thanks for your active engagement with industry. Question I have, maybe a slight variation on the theme, but I think we can agree that there is a cycle of lessons learned and enterprise evolution, if you will, that that indicated by where we were and where we are now. And while we can debate the frequency of that cycle, the fact remains that it's there, and it's driven by any number of factors, emergent factors such as budgetary perturbations, world events and demand on assets, political influences, changes in the industrial base, and so on and so forth. But I think that there are a few overarching factors that drive us to where we are. I mean, we are not where we are now by accident. And you consider such things as appropriations and the restrictions that places on our flexibility to achieve some of the objectives you've laid out here, from SCN to OMIN to OPN. Enterprise organizational structure that drives acquisition strategies and contracts and even such things as configuration management systems and so on and so forth, that handoff there. So what do you see as the barriers to objectives, and how do you either break through those barriers or work around them to achieve some of the objectives you've laid out?
I'll start and say that, and I think Dave Gale probably talked about it the most, is that for the last couple of years, although we've put a lot of money into the maintenance accounts, it hasn't always been executed well. And as we looked at it, much of it was due to the uncertainty right around the first of the year. So you get to the point of beginning to execute the next fiscal year, you're on a sequestered baseline, you're on a continuing resolution, and that results in a smaller dollar amount than you had hoped to have and that maybe you planned for. During the course of the run-up to that point, there's a tendency to reach into that planning that was on Admiral Gale's chart, and pull things out, and then the money comes, oh no, it looks like we're going to have a budget, and it goes back in. And as a result, the planning product that goes into the start of that avail is all over the map. And we took all the tanks out because of the last budget drill, and now all the tanks come back in, and now go execute that avail on the schedule you said. We're going to go try to create the machine that takes that into account. That is, plan almost with your blinders on. So plan the avail with all the engineered maintenance, with all the modernization that was in the budget, all the way up to the point of issuing the RFP to the contractor who's going to do the maintenance. And on that day, we have the big meeting. We say, how much money is there? And invariably, over the last couple of years, on that day, there's almost always been enough money for the avail if we had fully planned it. And in some cases, it's, well, I know you de-scoped it, but put it all back in. And what that results then is in execution, you're executing a plan you didn't create, that you didn't create, could have. And as a result, we struggle to get through those avails. And it happens over and over again. And so what we're going to do is say, no, we're going to plan and provide transparency of that plan. And then on the day you got to decide that's the day to decide the final scope. Then issue the RFP and go down and execute that maintenance. That takes into account that variance, that sine wave that you talked about. If we can execute that process and execute it well, we'll plan those avails. And in my case, my assertion would be that in almost every case, the fleet will have the money on that day, and we'll execute those avails well and support the OFRP. So we're trying to change the dynamic not by changing the system that got us there, but by adapting to it and presenting a system a process that'll work repeatably, regardless of whether you have a budget on 1 October or not.
I'll also add, on the left-hand side of the business of planning, anything prior to the year of execution where we can stabilize a requirement, we kind of enter the year of execution in a relatively, I'll say, good place if we take advantage of everything we know. As I said earlier, we don't do that very well, and we need to do that. In the year of execution, when, as Admiral Hillardy said, things get a little wacky, where's the governance of what's really going to happen with those availabilities? It's got to be a lot more than just somebody waving their hand over and saying, plan it like you're going to get it, when in reality, I am taking work out, putting work in, taking work out, putting work back in, because the controls on that availability truly in the system are changing. And when you talk about making those decisions, is it an integrated view between maintenance and modernization? When we make the decision in the early days of the fourth quarter that we're going to take first quarter next year availabilities and pull them to the left, we have just taken months out of the planning process, and we never called the modernization guys to say, hey, what's the impact of me doing this to you? Can you do long lead time material procurement? How's your planning affected? Is it going to be integrated in maintenance? What's this really going to look like in execution? And so it's truly at the flag level, and I'll say at the flag level, there has to be a governance structure put into this business that nobody gets a chance to go reach in and pull a lever or point at somebody and give them direction without us all agreeing that that was a good thing, or because we have to do it, that we understand what the real impacts are going to be in execution. Because that's often forgotten until we get into execution. Everybody looks up and goes, holy crap, what did we do to ourselves here?
That's a technical term.
Yeah, and it works. And then we're trying to fix it on the downswing, and we can't. It's ugly. It's poorly executed. It comes out late, and everybody's dissatisfied with what's happened. So I would say just roll it back. There has to be put in place, if we're going to win, an accountability and a governance structure that allows us to make decisions collectively in the rugged environment we're trying to operate in, so that we all know how we got there. All right? That's my point. Thanks.
As Admiral Rodenclamp, and I don't go on record.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Laura Seligman from Inside the Navy. So you had due to sequestration in the CR, you had about a $3 billion shortfall in ship maintenance going into 2014. I was wondering what those numbers look like now, and do you think you're going to be able to do all of the scheduled maintenance in 2014?
Wow.
I don't know if I've got insight.
I don't think I have.
I don't have insight into that
We
one yet.
don't really. Although the Congress has decided, I don't think they told us
Well,
yet.
Erica Platt is here. She knows the answer.
Eric, go ahead.
What?
What was the answer, Erica? So it looks like,
Everything's fine.
and it kind of goes to the point I was making, is up until this moment, I couldn't have told you, for just the reasons you said. If we had planned well, sort of with our blinders on to this point, those avails would all be well planned and we'd have a chance of executing them well. We did. We reacted to those budget drills. We modified those avails. We took it out. We put it back in. And as a result, we won't be as good in 2014 as we could have been if we'd had that discipline. So you made my point. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good morning, Admirals. Thanks for being here. Good to see you
Tony,
again,
how are
sir.
you?
Terrific. Question, if I could, probably for Admiral Gale and Admiral Whitney. When you look at the C4ISR installations and the modernization there, can you talk about the collaboration and how tightly in the processes that's working across the seams and maybe even to naval aviation? And for Admiral Whitney, is there a mechanism by which you're talking about the commonality of presentation for what on the maintenance side we call PMS, on the IT side it's probably configuration control and management from a day-to-day network security point of view, the way that is presented to the sailors so it's common when you get into equipment, people understand that process commonly across the IT guys and the fire control guys?
Okay, great, thanks. So let me just cross SysCom. The idea of reestablishing the ship program manager authorities, as Admiral Gale talked about, they've heard those words, they've nodded to those words. I don't think they've really met that person yet, and when they do, they'll probably be less happy about it. But I think Admiral Horn said it best, is when you establish that discipline and you make it clear that you're not going to bend on it, that it's going to be real discipline, very quickly the program managers will respond and react and align. I know Admiral Brady is committed to it, although there's always that asterisk, except when the fleet says, no, I got to have that all. And that's, I think, to what Admiral Gale said, is that we still have to be able to override when we have to override. But it should be the exception, not the rule. And today it's the other way around. It's the rule, not the exception. So, yeah, I know you want to.
And I will say, it really is, going back, I'll use the term SPIM, but in the bigger sense, it's about how you lead the problem. I was in a conversation yesterday regarding a Canes install on a carrier. And it was a conversation happening months before the avail starts that should have happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we should have been debating what it was going to take to do that work. Areas of success, if I can go from C4 to C5, I'll just say C5. We have, I think, relatively high success today in fielding Aegis modernization. It's because we lead the problem years in advance in the planning, and in the programming, and the detailed effort that goes into making sure that a multiple set of SCDs combined is Aegis modernization, that we understand how it's wired together and how it's going to integrate in the availability and how we're going to execute that. That whole idea of leading that problem like we do in Aegis modernization into things like Capstone, Canes, and anything else that's ship impacting, we've got to pull that conversation to the left, like I said in my cone chart. At 720, we should be having, very detailed discussions about specific modernization packages on a ship and talking about what's going to integrate well, what may not fit. Do we need to buy more duration? What maintenance is planned, and how is that going to integrate? So that, when Admiral Gortney, truly, in the end wants his ship back on time, that what we did 2 years prior to that delivered on that. And it's not just we'll fix it on the downswing or we'll just add months to the availability because that's what we need to do because we didn't plan it right. So you said C4, I say it goes to everything. Pull it to the left, lead it from the front. We can win the fight, but SPIMs have to be out there doing that. So,
Did you have you want to take a stab at the other part of that?
I'll take a stab at it, and if my answer is not appropriate or good, then Mr. Andy Kelly is here in the front row, and he's the program manager. So anybody else has a 3M question, you can flash mob him afterwards. So to get to your question, to me it's as simple as just we got to get down into the technical details and no kidding, go down to the specifics. We've generalized. It's time to go back and getting down into the details and the specifics by component and making sure that we got it right.
Thanks, that gets it. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Tony. It looks like we're almost out. We're out of microphones. Oh, we got one more. I think.
Thank you, sir. Calvin Foster with TASK. We've been assisting NSWC Port Hueneme and PEO IWS with information assurance authority to operate challenges on the self-defense test ship, and we see a lot of difficulties that brings to the table, that requirement brings to the table, along with cyber readiness inspections. How do you address those kind of challenges at your level, and how do you see going forward the intricacies of the combat systems and integrated information systems, and how you kind of plan maintenance and operations readiness for that?
Thanks, sir. For us, at the end of the day, inside the combat system, it's all about executing a fire control loop. The issue that we have with information assurance, largely today, and this is being actively worked, I don't want to leave you with just the problem, but the issue that we have today is a lot of the solutions that we bring to information assurance are business solutions and not focused on making sure that we can keep a 4 hertz update rate to the Standard Missile or whatever is required in order to execute that fire control loop. It's not a business solution that we're after. We acknowledge that there are issues. We certainly acknowledge that those issues have to be addressed. But we are embarked upon multiple efforts to ensure the business of the combat system can be accomplished while we looked at those various protective measures, both inside the domains of the combat system and outside on those boundaries to protect what's inside. From the perspective of modernization, our perspective as IA is a very forthright, but also very cumbersome in execution of the paperwork required from an IATO to complete certification. There's an awful lot of steps that have to be accomplished there. As Admiral Gale said, we just need to lead turn. We understand that process. We just need to lead turn it so that we're not presented at an inappropriate time with, hey, we still got 17 steps left and only time for 12 of them to make.
I'll just add one piece to that, is that the total IT infrastructure of the ship, which includes combat systems, navigation systems, and then just the regular lands that you run PMS Sched 3.2 on, that broadly, if you understand its configuration and build it to the configuration, and then keep the switches internal to the system set to the switch positions that were specified when it was designed, those systems are highly defensible, even the older ones. What happens is we've broadly lost control, in many cases, of the configuration of that IT infrastructure. Too many other things have been connected to it. Too many other switch positions have been modified to make those things happen. And so in modernization, simplification that gets you a relatively straightforward to operate ship's land, like Keynes is when it's up and operational, will help with that to a great measure. But ultimately, there's a discipline piece here, both in the configuration of the ship and then the maintenance of I'll call the software configuration that's installed on the ship. So thank you very much for that question.
Thank you,
I think
sir.
that's our last question, Kevin.
Admiral, that is. I want to thank you for some really informative and terrific presentations and for your candid responses during the Q&A period. But more important than that, I want to thank all of you and your commands for what you do each and every day to support surface force readiness. Thank you.